As you know, I was born in Puerto Rico, I was raised in New York City, and even though I spoke fluent English for my first, second, and third grade class, they decided I belonged in a bilingual class. Now it's known, I think, as ESOL classes, and I read and wrote and everything in Spanish, and we had maybe about 1 hour a day back then of reading in English. It wasn't until I got to third grade that a teacher of mine, and I'll never forget her name's Miss Goldstein, she recognized really quickly, well, you read excellent in English. And so I actually became her helper and enjoyed third grade a lot. And fourth grade, it was an interesting transition. I went from bilingual, which is considered back then the bottom of the barrel type students, to a fourth grade honors class. And that really was a big moment in my life because I was working so hard. I got into this honors class. I was like, you know, a proud peacock. I was working so hard that actually my mother and the teacher had a conversation, and the teacher called me, and her name was Miss Colgate. I'll never forget, like the toothpaste. And Miss Colgate called me and she said, you know, Vivian, it's not all about work. You have to have time for sleep, and you have to have time for play, and you don't have to study quite as hard because you're doing great. Because I was basically, I wasn't sleeping at night because I was so concerned about studying for the next test, doing my homework, reading whatever book it is that I was supposed to be reading, that I wasn't even resting. So I guess my fourth grade really shaped the rest of my life, because I think although I heard her advice, I never fully took it, and I guess I'm a workaholic to this day. In New York City, I was an operations manager for an educational video distribution firm, and now I'm dating myself because nobody uses video anymore, right? One day I get a phone call from my brother that had moved to Florida. Actually, he lived in Orlando at the time, telling me that he was buying a home and he thought I would love the area, and what a great opportunity for me to buy a house. So I called the guy, got the information, and really without thinking about anything, I bought a house. But my mother actually convinced me that, of course, by this time I came down, I fell in love instantly with the area. It's beautiful. So anyway, with a little bit of prodding from my mom, I decided to relocate. When I moved down, so my brother had moved down, but when I moved down, I bought my mom and my brother, which was underage at that time, to live with me. I bought my grandparents, which they were both alive. My grandmother's only alive now. I've lost my grandfather, with me. They also eventually bought a home in Osceola County. I'm an accountant by trade, and everybody told me, you are absolutely insane to leave New York City, and the pay in New York City to go to Florida, you're not going to find a good job, blah, blah, blah. So I did some calculation, and I actually calculated to the penny the amount of money I needed to make so I could survive, because I knew I wasn't going to make what I made, you know, after having worked 11 years in the same company in New York City. And I was really fortunate. I took 2 weeks off when I moved down just to kind of acclimate myself, and once I started looking for work, I immediately was able to gain employment. So I was thrilled. Of course, it was a much lower, you know, it was in accounting, but it was a much lower position than I was, but it was a really, really good company. And I was there over 11 years until I became a commissioner. I was actively involved in my community, volunteering, different organizations, you know, from nonprofits like Give the Kids the World, to working a lot in the Hispanic community. There are a lot of Hispanics in Osceola County, and a lot of them are transplants, what we call, from Puerto Rico, that moved into Osceola County. And when they come here, they necessarily don't understand the voting process, and they get intimidated and don't want to vote, and so their turnout is quite low as compared to if you look at the turnout on the island of Puerto Rico. So it's been a passion of mine to educate them and help them understand the political process so that they could register and exercise their right to vote no matter what party, because it's just so important for us to have a voice in our community. Being an accountant and also having an MBA and having that business perspective, and having worked, ironically enough, in the tourism industry for many, many, many years. Before, growing up, my mother was a travel agent. It gives you a background and a perspective that really does help you make the decisions and look at them in a critical way, not just as somebody that has always been, there's nobody that's always been an elected official, but that has been a long time and maybe he doesn't have that type of a background, in being able to analyze the data is something that I always do, and I always want to see the numbers, because I want to make sure that whatever we're investing in with our taxpayer dollars are going to give us a return on investment in the future. So for me, it's important.